Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Buzzer. We have a Nashville legend that, if you were around the game of basketball in the late '80s, his name was synonymous with it. He's a guy that at one time or another was the all-time leading scorer in college basketball. I think he's maybe number two now. A guy that was a four-time All-American at David Lipscomb University. A guy that was NAIA Player of the Year, member of the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame, the Small College Basketball Hall of Fame. Um, he is the current AD at Lipscomb University and has been since 2008. A guy that's still giving back to the game and to athletics and academics. We're excited to have Philip Hutcheson on. How's it going, Philip?
Yeah, it's super. I'm down for the baseball tournament right now for the Atlantic Sun baseball tournament. So, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Uh, So, who were some of the biggest influences on you as a player back in the day when you first got started, and maybe give a little background of where you came from before you got to Nashville?
Yeah, well, I'd have to start with my dad, Robert Hutcheson. He was the guy that would go out in the driveway and shoot with me every night after work, and the neighbors would put up with me turning on the boom box and continuing to shoot, all through the evening and all. So I have to thank the Cheathams that used to live behind me for putting up with me shooting basketball late at night. But yeah, my dad, he coached some of my teams. He was a high school player in several sports with the Hillsborough High School. Kind of a teacher at heart. He's always been one that my aunt is in the Vanderbilt Tennis Hall of Fame and the Tennessee Tennis Hall of Fame, and she credits him with teaching her tennis. And so my dad he was kind of always that, and he was always around. And, so he would be number one, obviously. Most people would know Don Meyer, college basketball coach. I had great coaches in high school. Mike Roller was a fantastic coach in high school for me my senior year, and learned a lot from him. And it's a long story, but he had come to Nashville to coach at the university and then decided he wanted to go back to the high school game. He was a great influence. Coach Meyer then for 4 years at Lipscomb, 86 to 90, has been the answer for a lot of people. So he was definitely a very formative in so many ways. I'm sure we can talk more about that at some point, but he was a great influence. And I started going to Lipscomb basketball camps when Coach Meyer came to town. I think he came in about 77 or 78. I'm from I tell people I grew up in Brentwood when Maryland Farms was a farm. Like I literally was, I lived there my whole life, and then went to Lipscomb High School and then Lipscomb University. So I'm as biased as they come about Lipscomb, but those would have been some of the real influences for me in my basketball journey, I suppose. But very thankful I've had a lot of great people in my life over the years in that regard.
Awesome. So, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you about your thoughts on the Battle of the Boulevard, both as a player and also as being an AD of Lipscomb, and just that Battle of the Boulevard, which is so famously noted between you guys and Belmont.
Yeah, that's really a Nashville for people who've been around for a while. That's kind of a Nashville institution in some regards. I would say it started really. I mean, Lipscomb and Belmont have played each other since the '50s or maybe earlier. I don't really know. I mean, but it's I have to go back and look. We've played 160 or 70 times over the years, and so. But back in the late '80s, Lipscomb when I was there, and really before me, I give credit to people who were before me, but we had really started to build a great NAIA program. And in '88, I guess, my junior year, we had really been playing. Trevecca was really good back then, and still is. And Trevecca was a real, Trevecca beat us 3 times my freshman year, and then we kind of got the better of my sophomore year. And then my junior year in '88, '89 is when Belmont started really getting going. Joe Bailey was great. I know you've had Joe on, and he's a great player. And Scott Corley, the AD there now, was a great player. Scott Speedy, Tim Bell, Greg Thurman. I mean, they were putting together a real team, and we played each other, and we were getting the better of them most of the time. I mean, if you just kind of look back at the records, I mean, we still were figuring out a way. But my last game of my junior year was the game that most people remember. I feel like kind of the one that kind of got it going, because we were 38-1. We were ranked number one in the nation. We'd lost one time at Bethel earlier that year. And Belmont came out and just played an amazing game at our place. Joe just went off, couldn't stop him. I remember we tried to guard him man, I think in the first half. Halftime, Coach Myers looking at the score sheet. He's like, Joe Bailey, 29 points. I'll tell you one thing, he's not getting 29 in the second half or something like that. And maybe we played design. We did something different. I don't remember what it was. Obviously ineffective. He had exactly 29 in the second half, and they beat us. And so they went to the national tournament. We went home. There was no at-large bid back then. And so, we were 38-2, number one in the nation, and we were at home. Next year, we played, I believe it was 6 times. You fact check me, but I believe we played 6 times. My senior year, we played like our Christmas tournament, their Christmas tournament, preseason tournament, et cetera. I think they beat us maybe one time earlier in that year. Don't recall. But we played then. Belmont was gracious enough to give up their home game in the conference season we played at Vanderbilt Memorial Gym. And that was really the one where there were T-shirts that said Battle of the Boulevard, and I don't know, Ron Samuels had been really involved with it from the banking perspective, and Ron Bargatze and some others, and they all put it together, and so we had this big game at Vanderbilt and sold it out. I remember we had a board in the locker room, a whiteboard that Coach would draw plays up on, and in the corner we had all made our predictions about what we thought the crowd was going to be at that game. And so nobody wrote a number bigger than, I don't remember, maybe not even 10,000. I don't remember. And the NAIA record for a game was 9,000 or 10,000 for when Emporia State, I think, played in the NAIA tournament in Kansas. And we sold it out, 15,000 at that time plus, and it was general admission, so just sit wherever. And so that was kind of it. I mean, that's kind of like where it really. And then over the years, obviously, we've had tons of great games since then. We both moved to Division One. We're 2 miles down the street. A lot of the players, not as many players know each other now, like from high school days as we did then. But still, they know each other. They get together. They play ball. Right now, we got several that are in like Bible studies together, things like that. So it's still a great game, and it's still, to me, if you love basketball, it still feels like kind of that it's got that energy, that excitement. It matters. It's not just a throwaway game on the way to something else. And so it's always been great. We got the better of them for a while back then. They've won more than they've lost more recently, but it kind of goes back and forth, and you still really can't ever predict for the particular game what's going to happen. It's a great rivalry.
Yeah, it's cool. It's been one of those that, again, is kind of changed over years, but still has that mystique to it. Even though the players have changed, and now even the coaches have changed. You don't have Don Meyer over there anymore, and you don't have Rick Bird over there anymore. But yet it still still has great traction. It still has a camaraderie between the two schools. Seems like there's a lot of respect and a lot of. Again, nowadays kids they do so much together. Back in the day, everybody kind of stayed separate a little bit. But it is a cool rivalry. It's a Nashville tradition.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is still a Nashville tradition. And to your point, I mean, things have changed, but the schools have similar missions. Academically and just kind of everything else, and so there's a lot of people in town. I mean, one good thing about both those schools is a lot of their alums like Nashville, so they stay around. And so there's a lot of people who still care. And then even if you just love basketball, over the years, we've just tended to play, I think, exciting basketball to watch. I mean, high level, ball movement, people movement, smart players, skilled players. And so, I mean, just if you like to watch basketball, it's just enjoyable to watch. So it's been a great rivalry for sure. And it's a little tougher now because we're not in the same conference. Back when we were, it was a little later in the season. You can't escape. I mean, football goes now. College football kind of goes all the way through into February almost now, and so basketball season for a lot of people mentally doesn't get started until January or whatever. We can't play then because we're both in conference by that point. So it's that's a little tougher. I still think people enjoy it, have a lot of buzz around it, all that. Probably the thing you miss a little bit is it's just not later in the season. Because, I mean, you think about it, back when we were playing, I mean, not only do the games big rivalries and you're 2 miles apart and you know each other. I mean, when we won my senior year the last time, when we beat Belmont my senior year the last time, we were, again, I think number one in the nation, but they were top 5 in the nation. Well, they didn't get to go to the national tournament that year. I mean, because same thing, no at-large. The year after is when they started at-large bids. I think they started saying, like, why do we keep getting one of the top 5 teams shut out? And, and so then they changed it in 90, 91, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So anyways, it's been a great rivalry.
So what was it like to play for Don Meyer?
Well, I knew Coach Meyer from all the way back in basketball camp days. As I said earlier, he started basketball camps when they really weren't a thing. Like, he had either gone or at least he was very familiar with Snow Valley, who did a bunch of camps out in California, I believe it is, and that they were kind of the pioneers of that. Coach, when he came to Nashville, he started basketball camps in the first year. I think maybe. I don't remember how many. I went to one of them. I've got the picture from camp back in the day, and back then, if you didn't go to basketball camp in the summer, that was like your only fix of basketball. There weren't summer leagues, there weren't lessons all year long. I mean, it was like if you wanted basketball, you tried to find this camp, and you did it for like 1 or 2 weeks if you were lucky, and that was it. And so I started going to those camps. And so I knew Coach Meyer from that perspective all the way back in like 6th or 7th grade. I broke my wrist in 7th grade. I sat out of like for 6 months. I had surgery on my wrist and I couldn't go to basketball camp. Well, Coach Meyer let me work basketball camp. This is the first NIL deal, I guess, because I did the concession stand with Joe Gaskin, who coached for a long time. And Joe and I did the concession stand. I would get there and, we'd clean it, open it up, get there about 6 o'clock. I had a cast on my arm. And so for 7th grade, I did it. I got a check. I got $75 for 1 week, and it's still in my office at work. It's still framed on the wall. And and that was my first, it was my first ever check. I was like 7th grader. You don't get a lot of checks, for work. You get cash back, I guess, Venmo now. But so I got a check for $75 for 1 week's work of, one of my weeks at basketball camp in the concession. So I knew Coach a long time ago. And then obviously being at Lipscomb Academy, Lipscomb High School then, we were right next door. And so, when it came down to where I was going to go to school, really not a lot of NAIA schools recruited me. A few did. Birmingham Southern did a little bit. Joe Dean was junior. Joe Dean Jr. was the coach there then. But I think, ironically, they're the ones that beat me my last game, or beat us my last game of my career. Really, I think a lot of the NAIA schools assumed, like, hey, he's going to go to Lipscomb if he goes there. And so it came down to Furman or Lipscomb were the 2 schools for me back then. I decided to go to Lipscomb. Coach was all basketball all the time. He liked to say, I don't have hobbies. I don't play, I don't play golf. I don't hunt. I don't, whatever, garden. I don't know what else. But, he didn't do any of that. It was just basketball. And he was just such a great teacher. And he was such a great collector of ideas. Now you can kind of go online and, I don't know, search and, whatever. You can probably get AI to do a search for you and click. Back then, somebody had to be the one reading all this stuff or finding all this stuff somewhere, highlighting a book and copying it, typing it out, and whatever. And Coach used to give these kind of quote motivational packets out after camp and all. And I've still got a lot of that stuff too. And just all this good stuff that was just about life. And Coach was the one that collected all that and just, read it and shared it. And he'd show videos of, things he had found. Dick Butkus video from, back in the Chicago Bears days. He'd talk about toughness or, show, I don't know. I remember he had some video about some sort of tiger in South Asia that, it was like a National Geographic thing or something. And he would, show it, talk about like how this tiger had to hunt for days and days to finally get something to eat, persistence he'd talk about. So he was just always doing that kind of stuff. And we always used to say, when you played, it was always like, Hutch, you can't get back on defense. You don't play defense, blah, blah, blah. You never rebound, whatever he'd say. I mean, he'd always say, this, that, or the other. And then the second you graduated, because, for us, it had been like Alan Banks and Ricky Bowers and, some of the guys who played before me, I wish we had one player on this team like Ricky Bowers, I wish we had one player like Alan Banks or whatever, and then as soon as you graduated, you went from being terrible to, I just wish we had one player like Philip Hutcheson on this team or Wade Tomlinson or, whatever. I don't know how that happened. We actually called it, there used to be an old cartoon on called the Super Friends, and it had this like League of Justice, and you had all the superheroes lived in this place. And we said as soon as you graduated, you got put into the Hall of Justice or the League of Justice. You became a super friend for Coach Meyer's mind, But until then, it was all about continual improvement. There's way more stories than time to talk about him, but he was a great influence, great coach. If you have time, I'll give you one good story from Ronnie Carter about that.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of my questions I was going to ask you. Give me a great Don Meyer story. Yeah, that'd be great.
It's a little bit secondary. I can give you some personally about him too, but
Okay.
But secondary, I saw Ronnie Carter. Ronnie Carter was the head of the TSSAA for 30 or 40 years. I don't know. He was the godfather of the TSSAA forever. And great man. And I saw Ronnie Carter at Lipscomb back in 2007, I guess 8 or 9, right after I took the job. I said, "Hey, Hutch," he goes, "I was out at the convention for all the executive directors of all these state associations. Well, by this time, Coach Meyer had left Lipscomb and gone to Northern State, which was a D2 school in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And he coached there for a long time. He's actually got his name on the floor at Northern State and at Lipscomb. So not many coaches have their name on 2 floors, but Coach does, Coach Meyer. And he did this thing called a coaches academy where he would bring in big name coaches to do clinics and stuff like that and invite high school coaches and college coaches. And he did that in Tennessee. And then when he went to South Dakota, he did the same thing and had 300 or 400 coaches. I was there when Pat Summitt went out to South Dakota. I was at that one. But Ronnie Carter said, yeah, he goes, I was at that convention. This guy came up to me and said, "Do you know Don Meyer?" And Ronnie said, "Oh, yeah, for sure." And he goes, "Well, what do you think about him?" And Ronnie said, I told him, he said, "There's not a man or a woman, dead or alive, who's had more positive influence on the game of basketball in the state of Tennessee than Don Meyer." He said, "I go from Bristol to Memphis and everywhere in between." And he said, "And I see teams that are running their stuff, doing their warm-ups." His videotapes, Coach Meyer made videotapes back then before everybody was making instructional tapes. His videotapes are on every coach's wall, shelf. They're at his clinics. He said nobody has had as much positive influence on the game for high school basketball as Don Meyer. And that guy said, "Well, I'm the director for the state of South Dakota." And he said, "It's the exact same here." And so I think that kind of tells you all you need to know. He was great. He was great. He loved the game and he gave a lot back to the game. And so he was always a guy that if you're a first year middle school coach and you saw him at Captain D's, he was asking you to draw up your out of bounds plays on a napkin for him, and so he was great, great coach, um, and he was really fiery on the sidelines, but but then off the court, he was much. I wouldn't say a lot different, but I mean he definitely was more personable than people might have guessed by watching him.
Right. So, what's a great story while you were playing? It could be something tied to a game, or it could be something off the floor. It could be about him that you think about and you think, "Oh, wow."
Well, man, I mean, there's so many. I I remember we played, and my teammates, if they're ever watch this, they'll fact check me on this. I'm going to get it generally right, maybe exactly wrong, because I'm trying to remember now. We played a game against, I want to say it was Union, down in Jackson, Tennessee, and they had a guy that I cannot remember. He had something wrong with his left. I believe it was his left arm. He like genetically, like he couldn't use it very well or something, or almost not at all. I can't remember now. And and I remember he, Coach Meyer just yelling. I mean, the whole gym, it was like, make him go left, make him go left. And I mean, this guy literally just, couldn't do it. But he was just ruthless. I mean, he was just, just yelling. If
Wow.
Shannon Terry watches it, Shannon's the one that tells the story so well, and I cannot remember the facts exactly. I just remember, I mean, he definitely was a competitor. I mean, no doubt about it. But he was. I was trying to think. I mean, there were so many times just he would. I remember one time he was talking in the locker room about, one of these videos. Like we're sitting in the team room, and he showed this video. There are times he just would kind of get lost in his own thoughts. He's just up there, and you're just kind of in his world. And he says something like, I mean, I'm almost word for word in this. He was like, "It's the simplicity and the exactness of truth that makes it beautiful." Blah, blah. It goes on for about a minute. Just this kind of stream of consciousness, like where he's just mumbling to himself. And I mean, we're all sitting there. He's expecting us to take notes, and we're trying to figure out what to write. And I just remember Ralph Turner, who was the perfect counterweight to Coach Meyer, because Coach Turner was just, as I said about Ralph Turner, he was full of it, and you knew he was full of it, and he knew you knew he was full of it, and nobody cared because it was just a lot of fun. He was just he was a great basketball mind, and he really was a very good basketball coach. Still is, actually, I think. And
Yeah, we're
but Coach
friends
Turner,
on
I just look over
Facebook.
at
He
Coach
is.
Turner. Okay. Yeah, yeah. And so I just look over at Coach Turner, and he's leaning back, and he's kind of doing this. He's just rolling his eyes. He's just like, what in the world? And we're all trying not to laugh, and Coach is just up there pontificating on something. And that was about, once every month or two. It's like like that computer where the little wheel just starts spinning and spinning, and it's
Yeah,
just like you got to kind of like hard reset. I mean, he was in one of those moments there. Just there was too much information coming in. So, but he was great. I mean, we loved him, and wouldn't have had it any other way.
that's cool. Yeah, kids today, because their attention span, with the phones and everything else, I don't know how they would handle a guy like Coach Meyer in today's world, because their attention span is so short. I coached for 32 years, and it went from 2-hour film sessions to 30-minute film sessions, and going through and having clips cut out and going through certain things because their attention span would be just so short.
Yeah, it was terrible when you had, and there were no rules at NAI. You could practice 5 hours. You could watch film. Like there was no, now you have limits on for NCAA, like how much you can do in a week. Well, back then we started like once Labor Day was over, we came back, we started, and 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 the film was terrible because you would get the clips, they'd hand them out, you'd get them, and you'd look, and there'd be already like 30 things on there, so you knew it's going to take an hour and whatever. And then the problem is every clip, like let's say it was you, say okay, he'd be like, Troy, that closeout is terrible. Like, look, whatever, closeout short, blah blah blah, and then he'd be watching it, and he'd be like, and Hutch, what are you doing over there? And then so he'd go on. Like it's not just the clip that he had clipped. It was then he would see every other thing on the there that was wrong. So whatever you saw on the sheet, multiply by 4 because it was going to be that, and then everybody else what they were doing wrong. So
Wow.
then it was just it was terrible. But but I will say this. Because people ask me this about, well, could Coach Meyer coach today and all of that? And I say absolutely yes. One of the things that he was so good at, he used to talk about adapting versus adopting. Excuse me. So he would say, you don't necessarily take everything from a program or an idea, but you take what fits you. And I remember going to Lipscomb games growing up, excuse me, and they would pass the ball, no shot clock. They were passing the ball 35 times. And their own crowd was booing them sometimes. They were so boring and just, but they didn't have a lot of talent. Well, they had some talent. I don't want to say not a lot. I'll let the players then figure out who was talented and who wasn't, but they had some talent. And so he had to play to shorten the game up. Well, by the time we came, there was a shot clock and a 3-point line. My senior year, we averaged 100. Literally, I'm not like just saying a number. We averaged 110 points a game my senior year.
I
And
remember
so
that.
he had figured out, yeah, he had figured out how to adapt to the times. And I'm confident that if he was coaching now, I don't know what he'd be doing, but I know he would have adapted to the times because he was able to do that. And I don't know that he would have loved everything that's going on right now in the game, um,
Right.
but he would have figured out how to play the game.
Yeah. He was one of the first, always it's kind of funny, but he's one of the first to kind of get technology involved with the tape recorders and tape, speaking in those tape recorders during y'all's games, during the things, and he would get in and he would go back and do that. I'd never seen anybody do that before.
Yeah, he had people now. I mean, if you're younger watching this, I mean, it was like a little micro cassette recorder. And so he would talk into it and just give, again, like I said, stream of consciousness. And so then it was up to Barbara Anderson, who was, saint on earth, who was his assistant for so many years, that he would give her those tapes. And sometimes we'd come in the office in the middle of the day, she'd have like headphones in and she'd be typing out just all the notes of whatever he had been saying, and she would give them back to him. And he wore out several of those tape recorders, and he would keep it on, like you said, during the game. He would be watching the game and pull it out. So it'd be like using your phone now to do that. But again, that was just kind of him, like just kind of always learning, always thinking, always capturing ideas. And so he was ahead of his time. And then he did these videotapes where, again, no NIL back in the day, as my teammates and I like to say, because we did, I think we got like free Captain D's for lunch if we did, but we did all of these tapes, on
Yeah.
just, I mean, there were over 40 of them by the end. It started out being about 20 something, and he would do, stuff about how to develop a post player or a guard, and then he would do stuff on zone attack, and then he would do stuff on defense. And well, we did all of that. He'd gotten a guy that had worked at Channel 5, WTVF, CBS affiliate, a guy that he knew that videoed this and put it all together, and so they were really good. And I know when I went to Georgia to grad school, I went to the University of Georgia, and Mark Sloniker was an assistant coach for Hugh Durham back then. I think Hugh was still the coach. I can't recall, but Mark Sloniker was still there. And I went in his office just to say hi, and he had the whole shelf full of all those tapes. And, coaches all over the country had those things. And that, again, he was really one of the first to do that. And so with the camps and the tapes and, all this stuff, he put out a shooting book and all. He's very entrepreneurial in that.
Absolutely. So tell me what it was like when you got the call to take the athletic director job at Lipscomb University. I know that probably has a huge place in your heart to have been a guy that played there in such a vital part of the basketball program, but then to come in to help guide the university from athletic directors.
Yeah. So Lipscomb made the decision to go D1 in May 1, 1999. And then there was a 4-year period where they transitioned, like all schools have to, between NAI or D2 or whatever to D1. And so I'd heard from some people back then, like, would you be interested in talking about the job? I really wasn't at that time. I was my family's been in the asphalt paving business since World War II in Nashville. And my grandfather, my dad, I was working there, and I enjoyed it. It was a real blessing to work. Again, I spoke about my dad being such an influence in me as a basketball player, but it's a real blessing to get to work with one of your parents if you have a chance, because a lot of times as a young person, you don't really appreciate kind of what they have to go through day to day. And, you just know they come home and
Sure.
throw the ball with you, play ball, go to your games. So to be able to see him every day, see how he grinds, still does, works, all of that, it was great. And but Lipscomb called me back in '08, and the timeline was really interesting. So I was kind of thinking about it. They had reached out through one of the vice presidents there to say, would you be interested? And I talked to him at Starbucks in Brentwood, just kind of like a little conversation. But so I was just kind of thinking about what they said, and right then is when Coach Meyer, which is a whole other story, but Coach Meyer was in South Dakota. He was in a terrible car accident in September of '08 or late August of '08. Anyways, it was right at that time. Like it happened right as I was having this conversation. And so then that's kind of a whole nother story about him, where he was in this car wreck and then he lost his leg, and then they found out he had cancer, and all of this stuff happened. And well, I had just been talking to Lipscomb about this job, and I was kind of like, I think I may do this. And I went to see him because he had been in this wreck. I mean, it was really life or death at that time. We didn't know if he's going to live or not. And I went up, and so he was in this intensive care room, and so I talked to him about it a little bit, and I could tell it was kind of like giving him energy, just to kind of like have something to think about, probably other than his pain, honestly, probably at the time. And so we're talking, and he had when he left, he did not agree with Lipscomb going Division I, and he made that clear. And Lipscomb was going to do it, and he kind of left a little bit. It was rocky when he left, to probably be gentle about it, but so he left, and of course, a lot of people that loved Lipscomb and loved him. It was just kind of a tough spot. I mean, I tell people I felt like Switzerland. I was kind of in in the middle of this neutral country or whatever.
Yeah.
But I talked to him, and that was helpful to think through it. He had kind of told me, like, hey, well, he did tell me. He said, if you take the job, I will be supportive, be happy to help you, whatever. That was meaningful then too. And there's more to that story, but that was the gist of it. And so I took it, and I remember telling Dr. Lowry a couple things. I said, I appreciated my family, my parents being involved with me as a young person in my life with sports and all that. And if that's something I would have to just kind of give up for this job, I can't do it. And he assured me I wasn't. Now, of course, you have to make decisions sometimes about work and all that. And I think it's healthy for your children to see you work hard. I think that's a good thing for them to see you doing your job, because someday they're going to have to do that too. And,
Sure.
I did. I still coached my children's teams. I'd go to the games. I, would tell the athletes and the coaches, like, hey, I mean, I love you guys, but I'm only going to get to see my children at this stage once. And so I do that. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And I credit my wife, Vera, because she's the one. I've got 3 children. They all played sports. And Vera, kind of kept all that stuff going and logistics and, you know how that is, getting everybody around and all. So, but all of that's the personal side. Then the piece of, I'm a Lipscomb grad. My 3 sisters are Lipscomb grads. My 3 children are Lipscomb grads. I mean, I'm as biased as you can be about Lipscomb. I just think it's a great place. I had such a great experience. The 3, I guess actually the 4 guys who kind of were with me in that same class graduated. They're all in my wedding. They're all still friends. I mean, I still talk with them, some more than others, but. And so I just thought, well, man, if I could be a part of helping to create an experience that was as good as the one I had, that might be really cool. And so that was really almost as simple as it was. And I kind of told Dr. Lowry, like, look, if you're looking for somebody that's kind of, I don't know, I kind of exaggerate, but make sure the popcorn's hot or something, like that's really not it for me. But if it's about like trying to build something that makes a difference in the lives of the athletes and the community we have, and allows us to kind of change family trees and through sports, which I love,
Right.
then that would be a great opportunity. And it has been. It's been fantastic. It's not every day's not awesome. And I tell people, like, hey, if you just want to watch sports, go buy season tickets. It's much easier, because when you're at the game enjoying it, I'm enjoying it, but there's like this little bit of just like you're just watching, like, okay, is security over there ready? Is, how'd the national anthem go here? Is the line too long at the concession stand? Like, you're working. And
Right.
so, but what's so cool is just the relationships that if I were in my office, I would show it to you, but I have a file behind me that is a big, thick file folder now, thankfully over 17 and a half years, that my daughter decorated, and it's something like notes, read when you need a boost. And every time I get like a little letter or note from an athlete or somebody, I put it in there. And now I've got this huge, thick
Cool.
file of it. And I tell people, I said, if there was a fire in the building, that's the first thing I'd take out of the building, because it represents the relationships and the people. And I mean, I've been around long enough now. I've seen people who were on unofficial visits just kind of checking Lipscomb out as a sophomore, and now I'm watching their children play, YMCA soccer, and so it's that part's been really cool.
That's awesome. Before I let you go, I've been told I need to ask you about a story. Your good friend and past teammate John Wild sent me a text this morning. Knew you was coming on. He wanted me to ask you about the plane ride back from the NAIA tournament and Al Cooper.
Okay, well, I'm telling this story in love, okay, for a teammate.
Yeah.
So there's nothing but love here, okay. So my sophomore year, we go to the national tournament in Kansas City. We eventually lose to College of Idaho, and so we're going to go back. But Coach Meyer and Coach Turner had driven or had car out there. They were going to stay and watch the rest of the tournament, but it was over for us. And so we didn't have, now you have a staff of dozens who could do all the logistics. I mean, Coach literally said, hey, Philip, like, here are the tickets, like, somehow they got us to the airport. I don't even remember how. And so we get to the airport, and there was and so we're getting ready to leave. And there's an announcement. There's a problem. Our flight has gotten delayed or changed or something. We're not going to be able to take that flight. There's a whole group of us. I'm no travel planner, but I've got, however many, 15 or something people there. And so I go to the counter and they say, well, good news, bad news. Bad news is, this flight, you're not getting on it. Good news is we're going to be able to give you some first class tickets, or some number of first class tickets. And this is long for Southwest Airlines, I think. So I can't remember. But anyways, they give us first class tickets. Well, I'm standing at the counter with Rob Brown, and I'll say, rest his soul. Rob passed away a couple of years ago, and he would have been the best of all of us. Period. The end. Next paragraph. He'd have been the best for telling all these stories. He's like the historian of our team, and just such a great guy. Miss him. But Rob's standing next to me, and we're like, oh, okay, we don't have enough tickets for everybody to be first class. So how are we going to decide who doesn't get to ride first class? And so I said, well, and we only had one senior on that team, Greg Caudle. And I said, well, Caudle's the only senior. So Caudle gets to ride first class. His career's over. So we're like, Caudle gets to ride first class. And then Chuck Ross, who was kind of a famous kind of intellectual development and disabilities older man, but he kind of traveled with the team, super fan. So Chuck, I guess we let Chuck maybe not sit in first class. I don't recall. And then we had a red shirt or two. We were like, okay, well, we'll kind of do that. Like, we're just trying to figure out how to do this. We had one ticket left. The rest was like, how can we decide who's going to get it? And Rob Brown's going, give it to Coop, which was Al Cooper, because he knew how it would just make Al so mad if he gave it to him. And I was like, no, I can't just do that. I just can't just hand it to him. He's like, give it to Coop. And so finally I said, I tell you what. And I said, I know what to do. And I put the ticket, the one remaining non-first class ticket, on top of the stack of tickets. And I said, Rob, as the Bible says, the first shall be last. And so then I said to the whole team, I said, tell them the story. I said, we've got, and I pulled out the ones for Greg Caldwell and whatever. I said, we've got, first class tickets except, one ticket. And I said, and it's just whoever gets it's going to get it. And so I said, so just come on up. Well, Al just busts up to the front of the line. He comes up here and he grabs his ticket and he walks in and then he figures out, once you get on we're literally walking on the plane. I'm just handing him out right at the gate. Here you go. Well, it's just too late. And so he gets on there and he figures out like, I'm the one. And so he walks past first class and he sits down, and then we all start sitting in first class. And there used to be a curtain they would pull in first class. They don't do that anymore, but there used to be literally a curtain they would pull. So Darren Henry, great player. Darren turns around and there's the flight attendant right between Al and him, and Darren's in first class. And he says, "Excuse me, miss." He goes, "Could you pull that curtain to keep the riffraff out?" And he's looking right past her and Al just lost his mind. But I don't know. Those are the things. People ask me, do I miss playing? And I say I miss being in the shape I was in playing, the condition. But what I miss are those kinds of things. Those are the things that were obviously, I can remember that way better than I can tell you about any of the basketball games.
Lifelong memories, man, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Philip, I really appreciate you being on. These stories are great, man. That's the great thing about you played for a legendary coach, and the career that you've got is such great stories. Hopefully we can get you back on again and we can talk about some more. I know a few of your teammates like Marcus Bodie, Bandit is great. Yeah. And like I said, John Wild, absolutely wanted me to ask that question about that story. But I really appreciate you being on. And guys, be sure to subscribe the Zone Hoops 615 and catch another great interview like we got today with Philip Hutcheson. Thanks, guys.